Hail, how is everyone? You're with me, Mr. Dex. Welcome to the channel. The fourth and final Battlefield 1 DLC, Apocalypse, is almost here, and a couple of the maps have already made their way to the CTE, but more importantly, we now have seen the complete package of weapons and gadgets that we will have access to in Battlefield 1. So, I think it's a good time to do some comparisons and try and figure out which weapons are the best and which are the duds. So in this video, my mission is to figure out which is the all-time best infantry rifle for aggressive plays in Battlefield 1. Now do keep that in mind as you watch this video. Some rifles are better designed for more defensive plays. That's not really what I'm scoring on. So what do I mean then? I'm talking about rifles that are good for aggressive, attacking the objective play. Rifles that can not just hold their own, but thrive in close range, and rack up kills so you can take objectives with your team, and not just take pot shots at noobs on the other side of the map. Now, I'm pretty sure there isn't a rifle that can take down the entire enemy team just by itself, but you do need to be able to kill quickly in close range, now more so than ever with the buffs to the other weapon classes. The Scout really does have its work cut out. But anyway, I've watched a few of these videos circling on YouTube on this topic already. Some quite recent and some from quite a while back, and what I've noticed is that people try to compare rifles that just don't behave the same way. For example, you can't really compare the Martini Henry, a slow heavy damage weapon, with the Gewehr M95, a faster, less damaging rifle. Apples and oranges, guys. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break the infantry rifles into three categories. Firstly, the mid-range cannons, which are the standard infantry rifles with sweet spots around the 50-meter mark and above, with a decent rate of fire. Rifles like the Smle, the Arasaka, and the new Enfield, for example. The next category is the speed shooters that don't have sweet spots, like the M95 and the Russian Trench, and then the skill weapons, the two slow and heavy rifles, the notorious Martini Henry versus the Viterli Vitali. Lastly, for the sake of living up to the name of the video, I'll pick an overall winner to take the top spot as the best aggressive infantry rifle. Sound fair enough? Alrighty, let's get to it. Starting with the mid-range cannons. Now, there are a lot of these, so I'll be relatively brief. And I did say aggressive rifles, so I won't cover all the ones from the base game, just the ones that I think worthy of mention in the category. Note that some of these have carbine or infantry variants. There is a difference, and it's a trade-off. Carbines have way better spread, both ADS and hipfire, but recover slower. Personally, I think the carbine is better in close range because of how they're more adaptive, but player's choice. So, the first contender, the Smle Mark III. It is kind of the standard rifle, the starting scout weapon being the marksman variant, but also, pre-DLCs, I think it was pretty commonly accepted as being the best aggressive rifle. 10 rounds, relatively fast at 52 rounds per minute, quick reload, and a close range sweet spot at around 40 to 80 meters. It's so versatile and it just dishes out the kills so easily, and because you don't have to reload that often, you have the ability to really do some damage to the enemy team in a very short space of time. Its negatives were that it was on the lower end of the rounds per minute scale, and its bullet velocity was good, but not amazing at 720 meters per second, which is fine for close range anyway. You can't really see why this weapon was so popular. It's really, really nice. At this point, I thought I'd also briefly mention the Russian infantry as well. Another base game rifle, because while personally I don't think it's better than the Smle, I do think it's seriously underrated. Sweet spot is 60 to 100 meters, so marginally more long range than the Smle, 56 rounds per minute, and the bullet velocity is 820 meters per second. So it's faster than the Smle, and it has a faster bullet speed. So arguably it outperforms the Smle at all ranges outside of 40 to 60 meters. But it is all minor differences. The Smle still has 10 bullets, and its sweet spot is better for close range play. So for me, it's not enough to beat the Smle if I'm being honest, but it really is very nice, the Russian infantry, and personally, I find it more fun to use. Speaking of underrated rifles actually, this next rifle, the Lebel model, is really underutilized by the Battlefield 1 community. Released with the They Shall Not Pass DLC, its sweet spot is 50 to 90 meters, which is again slightly more long range than the Smle, and like the Russian, marginally faster as well. It has 8 rounds too, which is good, and the bullet velocity mirrors the Smle, so it definitely can perform very well in close and mid-range. But for me, the thing that sets the Lebel apart is its soft features. The iron sights, for example, are the best in the game. Super thin and non-obstructive, which makes it very easy to be precise. It also sounds good and feels good to use, which is why at the moment I'm using it a lot in place of the Smle. The only negative for me is reloading one bullet at a time, and that super painful final bullet, which makes using K bullets a real ball ache. But overall, a top class rifle, and you definitely should not dismiss it. As a side point as well, I realize that the clip I've used is a defending one, but I couldn't just not use it. It's just so easy to get kills with this gun. Next up, we have the Nagant, which was released in the Name of the Tsar DLC, and it's almost identical to the Russian Infantry, like in almost every measurable way. But to me, it just feels a bit rubbish. The iron sights are ugly and difficult to use, and it just feels very slow and sluggish. You can actually fire a second or so before the rechamber animation is finished, which is why the RPM looks good on paper, but it just feels really awkward to me. And to be honest, the marksman scope is more appropriate for the sweet spot, and the better of the two variants in my opinion. For me, it just doesn't have what you need for an aggressive rifle, I don't think. Like, I busted my ass trying to attack with this weapon and get a clip I could actually use, and this is basically the best one I have. Although, admittedly, the Nagant is not that bad, as I say, it's probably better geared for defense. So, the Nagant, not the greatest. Now we move on to the Arasaka, which was released with the Turning Tides DLC. Honestly, this gun is a beast. It has a closer range sweet spot at 30 to 60 meters, a higher rate of fire, and a faster bullet velocity than the Smle Mark III. Like, on this alone, I could argue it's simply better than the Smle. However, it does only have 5 rounds, which is significant. Also, for me, the iron sights are hard to use over longer ranges. It's kind of triangular shaped as opposed to a line, which means you can easily lose sight of the target if you're far enough away. I personally don't like this, but I'm sure others will disagree, because it's more of a preference than anything else. But overall, this gun is excellent in close to medium range, and that close range sweet spot is ideal for aggressive play. The last standard rifle I want to look at is the Enfield, which will be released with the Apocalypse DLC at some point later this month. Now, we don't have a lot of stats for this yet. All I can say is it has 6 rounds with a 5-string reload, and its sweet spot is 100 to 150 meters at this stage of development, which is identical to the sweet spot of the M1903 rifle, the longest range rifle in the game. So really, all I can give you is feel, and to be honest, it didn't feel great. Now, admittedly, I was playing on the CTE, and my sensitivity is set at max, which makes it hard to be precise at long range on the console. But for aggressive plays at least, it's not really going to do a lot for you anyway. The sights I found very hard to manage, and quite similar to the Farquhar Hills, but the biggest issue by far was the sweet spot. At 100 to 150 meters, even with a 2x zoom, it's not what I would call a high percentage shot. Your target is so teeny tiny, and if they're moving even just a little bit unpredictably, forget about it. Even though I reckon it has a pretty decent rate of fire, it was also pretty weak from the hip, which again is based on feel alone. I don't have the stats for this yet. It's definitely not a rifle you'd take to cap a flag, and so for me, the Enfield scored a big fat thumbs down for aggression. But anyway, I reckon that's enough on the standard rifles, I think. When it comes down to choosing a winner, I reckon the best rifle for you is always going to be the one that feels right and works best for your playstyle and level of skill. But based on the stats, in my opinion, the best of these is the Arasaka. It's fast, it's got a great bullet velocity, but most importantly, that closer sweet spot is going to get the job done. You're going to be very effective using this weapon aggressively. So that's the standard rifles. Moving on to the speed shooters. Now, I'm going to start with the Carcano M95. I think it's been fairly widely accepted as being also one of the best rifles in the game, and certainly the best of the speed shooters, because while it doesn't have a sweet spot, it does do a considerable amount of damage regardless of range, dealing an impressive but not lethal 90 damage up to 20 meters before that damage tapers off, therefore always requiring 2 shots or 1 to the head. It's also quite quick, with 66 rounds per minute, which is considerably faster than all of the other standard rifles, and it always reloads in a string. Also, the Carbine variant is a laser when firing from the hip, and is just as good as the Trench and the Carcano at this. But its bullet velocity is on the slower side at 660 meters per second, which of course means nothing at close range, but it does make headshots challenging over longer distances. But overall, a very nasty rifle, well suited to close range aggression with a bit of versatility. I can definitely see why this weapon is so popular. Next up, we have the Russian Trench, which is one of the least used rifles in the game. The Battlefield 1 community has pretty much rejected this weapon. And if you look at 2 stats in particular, it's not hard to see why. Firstly, it doesn't have a sweet spot, which is a characteristic of these speedy rifles. But second, the damage drop-off is quite severe. It does 80 damage to 20 meters, but drops off to 40 at around 60 meters, which means at around 50 meters, you will need up to 3 shots for the kill, and a headshot won't do the job on its own. Which looks bad for the Russian Trench, I know. But it does have one saving grace, and it's a big one. Its rate of fire is a staggering 124 rounds per minute, which is nearly twice as fast as its speedy shooter competitors, and it has great hip fire as well, which is of course great in close range. Like for purely close range, up to around 20 meters, and up to about 50 meters not accounting for various sweet spots. This rifle is objectively the best in the game, which does beg the question, is there a point to using a rifle in such close range in the first place? Surely just play the assault or medic class. That would be fine, But if you're used to playing scout and taking cover between your shots, you're likely going to be able to beat an automatic or semi-automatic weapon even in close range. I don't want to get bogged down on why so much. The point is that the Russian trench is loads of fun and really, really deadly in close quarters, and it's seriously underrated as a weapon. Last but not least for the category, we have the Carcano M91 Carbine, which was released with the Turning Tides DLC. Once again, this gun has not received a lot of love from the Battlefield 1 community, and like the Russian trench, I can kind of see why. But I believe the weapon is also misunderstood. Like the trench, the Carcano has a similarly severe damage drop-off, dealing 85 damage to 20 meters before dropping to 54 damage at about 90 meters. According to the stats, therefore theoretically only ever needing a max of 2 shots for the kill. However, I have needed a follow-up shot after a long-range headshot once before. Maybe this was a bug, but perhaps this stat isn't completely accurate. At 73 rounds per minute, it is slightly faster than the M95, but considerably slower than the trench. Bullet velocity though is 700 meters per second, which is quite snappy and means the Carcano is way more capable of handling longer range engagements than the Russian trench. In fact, it has several advantages over the Russian, including a bigger clip of 6 rounds and a better maximum minimum damage, whereas its only weakness is its rate of fire. To the Gewehr 95, its major weakness is damage, but also significantly more spread when moving while aiming down sights. But other than that, it has the same or better in every other measurable stat, including a better rate of fire, magazine size, and bullet velocity. It also recovers faster from hip fire, which gives it more of an edge over the M95 in close range. So if I were to summarize this weapon, it's way better in close range than the Gewehr M95, but arguably not as good over distance, depending on what you want, and it's better at range than the Russian, but cannot compete with it up close. It is a good weapon. I did mention this in a previous video, seriously underrated and loads of fun as well. Now there is one last weapon that I guess technically falls into this category as well, the M1903 Experimental. I'm not even going to discuss it. It's pure trash, the Calibri of the rifle class. You might as well be fighting the enemy team with a potato or a slightly pointy stick. But anyway, which of these speed shooters is the best? For me, this is really hard because it depends on your playstyle. If you want to get close and personal, I would say the Russian trench is exactly what you want. It's so fast that it has a time to kill of around 0.5 seconds all the way up to 50 meters, which is only 0.2 of a second slower than the Hellriegel factory at point blank. And it beats all the other rifles hands down at very close range. But a rifle is still a rifle. You want it to perform over longer ranges as well. So for me, it's between the Gewehr M95 and the Carcano. And this might be a little controversial, but I'm gonna go with the Carcano, and here's why. A 2-shot weapon is a 2-shot weapon. Yes, there are times when you might come across an already damaged player and get the kill with 1, but these are literally the only times the M95 will outperform the Carcano. I don't mean to be dismissive of that point, but if you trade for a faster weapon with an extra bullet and faster bullet velocity, I personally think you would be trading up. But as I say, playstyle is everything when it comes to comparing these weapons. The Gewehr is still a very nasty weapon, but for my playstyle, I personally prefer the Carcano. So that's the speed weapons. The Carcano is the winner. Lastly, we have the battle of the 2 heavy skill weapons, the Martini versus the Vitelli. Now, I am fully aware that many of you will have a favorite of the 2 already, and it may be hard to change your mind either way, so I thought the best way to do this would be to do a simple comparison. Starting with the Martini, which has a max damage of 112, and therefore a massive and very forgiving sweet spot of 30 to 80 meters. The Vitelli, on the other hand, has a sweet spot of 20 to 50 meters, which means it's closer than the Martini's, but the Martini's sweet spot range is larger, a whopping 50 meters of range for a one-hit kill, compared with the Vitelli's 30. Both guns have identical bullet velocities and minimum damage, but the Vitelli is almost twice as fast, with 46 rounds per minute to the Martini's 25. It also has a 4-round magazine, whereas the Martini is a single-round breech loader. At the end of the day, for both of these weapons in a 1v1, if you're operating outside of your sweet spot, you're going to be finishing with a pistol shot anyway. So for me, the winner comes down to how effective the gun is within its respective sweet spot. The Vitelli can pick off 4 targets in almost the same time the Martini can kill 2. Its sweet spot range is also closer than the Martini's, which means you can get closer to the objective and still nail those one-hit kills. And the Carbine variant has pretty good hip fire for those close range kills as well. Now, I think by now you can see where I'm heading, but before I call the winner, it's not hard to see why so many people adore the Martini. It's powerful, the degree of difficulty is quite high, and with the gorgeous sound it makes when you fire, combined with the chime of that kill notification, it's very satisfying to use. Also, with that extra range, for defensive plays, the Martini is ideal. You can stay back in cover and hold back a whole heap of guys just by popping up every few seconds and getting a kill. But this video is for aggressive playstyles, and firing once every 2.5 seconds or so is just not enough. You're just too limited. You can't push up very close, and you have to rely on your sidearm way too heavily, in my opinion. The Vitelli is faster, the Carbine has better hip fire, and the sweet spot is better for close range kills. I have been able to flank and take out objectives by myself with this weapon because people just don't expect you to be in that range and getting one-hit kills. Think about it, in 5 seconds or so you can kill 4 players and completely expose the entire objective to a massive flank. It's such a powerful gun, I just love it, and it's so underrated. I wouldn't take it into the Sinai Desert or anything like that, but on the right map, in the right situation, this gun is bliss. So those are my top 3 aggressive infantry rifles, the Arasaka Type 38, the Carcano M91 Carbine, and the Vitelli Carbine. Now I did say at the start that I would choose one of the 3 to take the spot as top dog. I have to admit, I don't really want to. As I said, these rifles are fundamentally different and should be played differently, so it's not really fair to compare them, but a promise is a promise. And I think just saying whichever rifle you like to use as the best is a massive cop-out. So if I had to choose one, I would choose the Arasaka. It's more versatile, it has a very close sweet spot, relatively fast firing, and good bullet velocity for range. So while it is outgunned in certain scenarios, I genuinely think it's the best overall, and it really is very nasty. When I'm struggling in a game, this is my go-to because it really is just that good. So there you have it, the Arasaka, guys, the best aggressive infantry rifle. I really hope you enjoyed the video, guys, or at least were able to see the difference between some of these weapons. Do you agree with my choices? Probably not, but let me know in the comments why. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and drop a like if you enjoyed the video. My name is Mr. Dex. Till next time, take care.